Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Look, I know exactly how you're feeling right now. Opening up that thick Class 10 history textbook for the very first time, it can honestly feel like standing at the bottom of a massive mountain. You've got so many dates, incredibly complex terms, and a syllabus that just seems, well, super heavy. But I want you to take a deep breath. Today, we're going to transform Chapter 1 of your NCERT social science textbook into one epic, high-stakes story. We're not just going to blindly memorize facts here. We're going to uncover the dramatic, action-packed history of exactly how the modern map of Europe was actually drawn. Absolutely no dry academic jargon, just clear, whiteboard-style breakdowns. You ready? Let's get started.
Now, what's really interesting about the very beginning of your chapter is this fascinating piece of art prepared in 1848 by a French artist named Frédéric Sorrieu. It tells an incredible story of a dream versus reality. You've got the peoples of Europe and America marching together in this massive, endless train, offering homage to the Statue of Liberty as they pass by. But check out the ground in the foreground. You can clearly see the shattered, broken remains of the symbols of absolutist institutions. Things like crowns and royal crests. Sorrieu was visualizing a dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics. But keep in mind, back in 1848, this was purely just a dream.
To make this whole chapter super easy to digest, here's our game plan for today. 1. Sorrieu's utopian dream. 2. The French Revolution spark. 3. The rise of liberal nationalism. 4. Unifying Germany and Italy. 5. The Balkan crisis. And finally, 6. Check your understanding to make sure you are totally board exam ready.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Sorrieu's Utopian Dream.
Right off the bat, you're hit with some pretty heavy historical vocabulary, so let's prevent cognitive overload and make these crystal clear right now. The first major term is utopian. Sorrieu's vision was a utopian one, but what does that actually mean? Well, let's use a relatable analogy. Imagine a school where there are literally 0 exams, absolutely no homework. The cafeteria serves free pizza every single day, and your timetable is just games periods. Sounds absolutely amazing, right? But it's also highly unlikely to actually exist in the real world. And that is exactly what a utopian vision is. A society so incredibly ideal and perfect that it basically exists only in dreams, not in reality.
Now we have to contrast that beautiful utopian dream with the harsh reality of Europe at the time. The reality was absolutist. An absolutist government is a monarchical system of rule that has absolutely 0 restraints on the power it exercises. Think of it as a highly centralized, heavily militarized, and extremely repressive regime where whatever the king says goes. It's the ultimate law. So Sorrieu was painting this utopian dream of democracy in a world that was actually being crushed under the harsh reality of absolutist kings.
Which brings us to a massive philosophical question. What actually is a nation? I mean, is it just people speaking the same language? Is it just a specific piece of land? To answer this, your textbook introduces a brilliant French philosopher named Ernst Renan. In a famous lecture at the University of Sorbonne in 1882, Renan completely shifted the perspective. He pulled us away from Sorrieu's artistic dream and threw us right into historical reality. Renan argued that a nation doesn't just naturally exist out of nowhere based on language or religion. Instead, a nation is forged through common struggles, the brave actions of great leaders, and the everyday sacrifices of common people.
So, the crucial point is how Renan actually viewed the existence of a nation. He famously said, "The existence of a nation is a daily plebiscite." Now, this is a vital textbook term you absolutely must know. A plebiscite is a direct vote by which all the people of a region are asked to either accept or reject a proposal. Renan essentially meant that a nation requires the active, ongoing consent of its people. It's like a large-scale solidarity, a daily agreement that we all want to live together. It's so much more than just borders drawn on a map by kings.
Moving right along to Section 2, the French Revolution spark.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. Because in 1789, France was a full-fledged territorial state controlled by an absolute monarch. But the revolution changed literally everything, shifting sovereignty directly from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. While the French planted the initial spark, watch how incredibly fast this fire of nationalism spread. Napoleon invades Italy in 1797, kicking off massive wars. By 1814 and 15, Napoleon falls, which leads to the Vienna Peace Settlement. Then, boom, 1848 sees widespread revolutions across Europe driven by workers, peasants, and the middle class. And all of this directly culminates in the unification of Italy between 1859 and 1870 and the unification of Germany between 1866 and 1871.
Which brings us to Section 3, the rise of liberal nationalism.
So the French planted the idea, right? But who actually grew it across Europe during the 19th century? We really have to contrast two very different groups to understand this dynamic. On one side, you had the old, super powerful aristocracy. In Central Europe, they owned vast estates cultivated by serfs. They were socially and politically dominant, but numerically they were a very small group. On the exact opposite side, thanks to the boom in industrial production, a brand new group emerged, the commercial middle classes. We're talking industrialists, businessmen, and professionals whose entire existence was based on producing for the market. And it was precisely among these educated, liberal middle classes that the ideas of national unity, and specifically getting rid of those aristocratic privileges, really spread like wildfire.
Okay, on to Section 4, unifying Germany and Italy. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive turning point in our story. The year 1848 changed everything. Nationalism actually moved away from democracy and revolution. Instead of the common people fighting for liberty, the kings and armies started hijacking the idea of nationalism for their own benefit. There's this really powerful question from your textbook regarding Germany. Can the army be the architect of a nation? Well, surprisingly, the answer was yes. Nationalist sentiments were actively mobilized by conservative forces. Why? Not to promote freedom, definitely not, but to promote state power and achieve political domination over Europe. The unification of Germany and Italy wasn't some democratic grassroots movement in the end. It was driven by conservative military and political maneuvering to consolidate absolute power under a shiny new national banner.
Now for Section 5, the Balkan Crisis. By the last quarter of the 19th century, that romantic, utopian dream of nationalism had completely vanished. It turned into a really narrow, intolerant creed. Take the Balkans, for example. This was a region of intense geographical and ethnic variation, places we now know as Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia, broadly known as the Slavs. A massive chunk of it was controlled by the crumbling Ottoman Empire. As nationalist ideas spread, different Slavic nationalities struggled fiercely for their independence. But here is the real tragedy. Major European powers, like Russia, Germany, England, and Austro-Hungary, they heavily manipulated these nationalist aspirations just to further their own imperialist aims and expand their power. This incredibly toxic mix of intolerant nationalism, perfectly aligned with aggressive imperialism, made the Balkans explode, ultimately dragging all of Europe straight into the total disaster of World War I in 1914.
Finally, Section 6, check your understanding.
What an absolutely incredibly turbulent journey, right? From a beautiful utopian dream of liberty to the sheer tragedy of a world war. Okay, let's dive into this and make sure you have absolute conceptual mastery over the specific questions your syllabus demands. We're going to turn those homework chores into a highly satisfying resolution of our epic story. Take this very common textbook question. What steps did the French revolutionaries take to create a sense of collective identity? To ace this in your board exams, you need rock-solid points. 1. They created a sense of collective identity through ideas like la patrie, meaning the fatherland, and a brand new French flag. 2. They pushed hard for a democratic constitution where citizens actually had equal rights. And 3. They formed a unified territorial state with a centralized administrative system, even replacing local dialects with French as the common language of the entire nation.
Next up, your textbook has a Write in Brief section, covering some key figures and events. Think of these as the final puzzle pieces of European unification. You've got Giuseppe Mazzini, the visionary who formed secret societies like Young Italy to spread nationalist ideas. Then there's Count Camillo de Cavour, the brilliant diplomat who forged key alliances to help unify Italy. You need to know the Frankfurt Parliament of 1848, which was the middle-class attempt to unify Germany under a constitution, even though it was ultimately repressed by the monarchy. And finally, the Greek War of Independence, a highly successful struggle that completely mobilized nationalist feelings among the educated elite across Europe to free Greece from the Ottoman Empire. Every single one of these played a vital role in shifting the map.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with this highly provocative textbook activity question. The text asks you to think about nationalist symbols in countries outside Europe and how they differ from the European examples we've just seen. Just think about it for a second. European nationalism eventually turned into aggressive imperialism. But outside Europe, in places like India, our nationalism was forged in direct confrontation with that imperialism. Our symbols weren't about conquering other people. They were about uniting our own people against colonial domination to form an independent nation-state. And that incredible anti-imperial struggle? Well, that is exactly what you'll be diving into in the next chapter on nationalism in India. Until then, keep exploring and keep questioning the history around you.